the outline of this panel is basically we're trying to focus on the various fronts. Since the massacre committed by Hamas, it has drastically impacted Israel's society and strategic position. Its consequences have also profoundly changed the geopolitical and strategic landscape of the whole Middle East. There is definitely before and an after 7th of October. From the north to the south, from east to west, Israel is facing a multi-front war against proxies that are part of what has become known as Iran's ring of fire around the Jewish state. This war, which has now lasted for almost a year, has taken a dramatic turn in the last 10 days. Indeed, the Israeli Air Force has devastated almost the entire senior leadership and military capabilities of Hezbollah, Israel's biggest threat and the most powerful proxy in the region. And the man who embodied Hezbollah during the last 30 years, Hassan Nasrallah, was killed on Friday in a pinpoint attack while he was meeting with the senior commanders of the group. From Hamas to Hezbollah, from the Houthis in Yemen to the pro-Iran militias in Syria and Iraq, we will take a stock of the situation on each of these fronts, and we will try to answer the following questions. What are the prospects for ending the crisis in both Gaza and Lebanon? What role could the Arab country that signed the Abraham Accords play in this regard? Is there a possibility to relaunch the peace process given the deterioration of the situation and the deep mutual mistrust between Israelis and Palestinians? So we will try to answer all these questions with our experts who have agreed to travel all the way from the US and Israel to share their analysis and thoughts, and I want to thank them for that because it was not easy for them. It's a very long trip in a very difficult time. So once again, thank you. And I will start by giving the floor to Omari, who is a senior fellow at the Washington Institute. He's a former executive director of the American Task Force on Palestine. He served as an advisor to the negotiation team, the Palestinian negotiation team, during the permanent status talks, in addition to holding various other positions within the Palestinian Authority. Reis, in one of your last study, you mentioned the need for reforming the Palestinian Authority as a necessary condition to planning for the day after in Gaza, providing a governance alternative to Hamas, and engaging future diplomatic initiative. But the current Palestinian Authority is clearly not up for the task, So how do we get there?
All right. Okay, it's on. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. And I have to say it's quite a challenge to come after that very systematic, very comprehensive presentation. I'm a lawyer, so I have to start with a caveat. And my caveat of the day is, well, I'll be focusing on the policy side of the conversation, the questions you asked and some other points. We have to remember the human cost of these conflicts. And it's key. I mean, from the people who were murdered on October 7th, the hostages, their families, that plight, to the Palestinian civilians who were killed and displaced, to what we're seeing right now in Lebanon. It's important to always ground our policy perspective in a human dimension and cost of these policies. You know, I know you asked me about the Palestinian Authority and the prospects, and I will focus on this, but I have to say a couple of words about what's happening in Lebanon, because I think it's essential. And actually, you know, Yaakov touched on it, but I want to emphasize that point. This is not simply an Israeli-Lebanese issue. Of course, it's playing on that arena, yet its implications go much further than that. Hezbollah is not just another Iranian proxy. It is the linchpin of Iran's regional policy. From the close relation that Nasrallah had with the supreme leader, to the fact that, as Yaakov said, they played a role in not only training and equipping, but also in managing some of the other proxies. So what's happening right now, actually, in Lebanon has the chance of changing and undermining Iran's whole, what you called it, cascade of sacrifice, but its whole regional approach of using proxies to push its agenda without actually paying a price. And Iran right now is facing some very, very difficult choices that it has to make. Of course, the war wars are never linear and things will go wrong, etc. But at the end of the day, what we're seeing, I think, it could redraw the strategic landscape of the region. Okay. So moving to Gaza, and from that to the Palestinian Authority. Where are we in Gaza right now? And again, Yaakov mentioned it. Right now, Hamas has been destroyed as a military organization. Its ability to function as a military organization, to pose a military threat of the kind that we had on October 7th, no longer exists. But Hamas remains a very strong insurgency, if one can use the word insurgency in this term. That requires a lot of extensive security work in the coming weeks. You said a year. I think that is quite ambitious. I suspect it will take much longer. Remember, the second Intifada ended in 2006. We're still dealing with the implications. So this is going to be with us for a long time. Now, if you look at Hamas, really Hamas today, when you talk about Hamas decision-making, it's only one guy, Yahya Sinwar. That was the case from the beginning of the war. After the killing of Haniya, what was assumed, what was de facto, has become de jure. And right now, Sinwar is the address. All of those guys in Doha and elsewhere, they cannot make decisions because they cannot control the situation on the ground. Now, initially, I think for Sinwar, who always wanted to see a regional war, he looks at what's happening in Lebanon, and in the short term, I think he will be more hardline in terms of accepting a ceasefire agreement. He is waiting to see. Will Israel fail in Lebanon? Will the Iranians come in? Will this create, light things up in the West Bank? So his motivation, which already was very low, to reach a deal is now lower. However, I think once things clarify in Lebanon, once things clarify there, he will be isolated, and ultimately he will have to accept a deal. Here we have, but as he tries to accept a deal, he will have one considerations in mind. He wants ultimately a hostage deal and a ceasefire deal that will maintain Hamas in some sort of power, that will prove that Hamas is indispensable and that nothing can work in the region without Hamas. And this actually presents a major risk. I believe what we saw in Hezbollah is a cautionary lesson. After the end of 2006 war, ended up with a very weak system that allows Hezbollah to rebuild, to regroup, to become a bigger threat. And I think as we look at the ceasefire later on, it's very important to make sure that we don't repeat the same mistake we had with Hezbollah, with Hamas, and ensure any deal guarantees the disarmament of Hamas and its inability to rebuild its capabilities. Now, the shift from a military operation to a counter-insurgency, counter-terror operation requires a different tool set. And one of the tool sets is the question of who controls the ground and who manages the civilian situation. You talked, Yaakov, about a Jenin-like situation. Well, in Jenin, we have an address, a civilian address, not a particularly functioning one, but one that nevertheless exists. And right now, Israel and the region, and I guess the world, has to ask itself the question, what is going to be the civilian governance system in Gaza? I wouldn't say the day after, because I think there is no day after. It's a continuum, but rather as we make the shift from military to counter-insurgency. Now, there is good news, but there's also complications. The good news is that many Arab countries, which have realized that instability in the Palestinian-Israeli arena can trigger instability in the whole region. Many of those Arab countries, whether it's the Abraham Accord countries, and let's not forget there are the old peace partners, Jordan and Egypt, they have expressed willingness to play a role in the day after. Just look at the statements by the Emirati officials. They're the most explicit about it. The statement from their UN ambassador, their Minister of International Developments, and other. However, and by the way, when you talk to Arab leaders in other places, Saudi, Egypt in particular, they will, even Jordan, they express an interest in playing a role. However, they do have conditions, and these conditions will force Israel to make certain decisions. At the end of the day, those Arab leaders are saying, we will only come by the invitation of the Palestinian Authority. As an Arab official told me, we need a source of legitimacy for our role. It cannot be Israel. We can have a UN Security Council resolution. Good luck with that, with Russia and China. So they have to come with the Palestinian Authority, and for their own, not only, I think, political, but also strategic interests, they want to start seeing a pathway to a Palestinian state. We hear this particularly from the Saudis. Now, you asked about a peace process. These countries are not naive. They know that a peace process right now will fail. No one wants to go back to peace negotiations. Any plan that says let's have peace negotiations is a naive, ungrounded, and ultimately counterproductive view. But they want to have the narrative and they want to have the process to go there. It creates a framework of legitimacy for them and also meets their national security interests. Israel so far has refused to accept either of these two conditions. The Israeli government is saying, you know, to quote Bibi, no Hamasistan, no Fathistan. Okay, Israel in its current configuration cannot even provide a pathway to a Palestinian state, to even a concept of separation. It's up to Israel to make this decision. But at the end of the day, as we say in the United States, you break it, you own it. If Israel is unwilling to provide the cover for those external actors to come in, then Israel might find itself in a situation where it has to control not only the military and security sphere, but also the civilian sphere. And as far as I know, no Israeli that I have spoken to actually wants to do that. One last point right now about, the Palestinian Authority. At the end of the day, it's only the Palestinians can govern themselves, and the Palestinian Authority is the only available address. But as you said, the Palestinian Authority today lacks both the capability, but also the credibility to do the job. The capability, it's weak, it's corrupt, it's inefficient, it's ineffective. It can barely hold the West Bank together. And the credibility, if you look at the polls, most Palestinians now want the PA to disappear. Around 90% of the Palestinians want the President Abbas to leave. This is not a very strong position. At the end of the day, the Palestinian Authority, if we're going to get a stable situation, has to be rebuilt. And when I say rebuilt, it has to be rebuilt on extremely different bases from what we have today. I'm not going to talk about democracy. This is the Middle East. Our experiments with democracy in the past, let's say, were less than stellar. But we need a system that has legitimacy through good governance. Look at the models we have in the Gulf right now of how you govern. We need to put pressure on the Palestinian Authority to be serious about a number of things. First and foremost is security. I think after October 7th, security, which has always been a demand, has become a prerequisite. We have to talk about effective, efficient governance, that it can create a sense of legitimacy among the Palestinians to allow them to come in. Again, there's good news because right now we have Arab countries which are willing to get engaged in this process, and actually they put it as a condition for involvement. But I think this is a challenge right now for some of the Western backers. And I will conclude with this point. Europe, as a collective, and individual states in Europe are some of the biggest, not only financial, but also political backers of the Palestinian Authority. I would say that's a good thing. It needs to be continued. A collapse of the Palestinian Authority is in no one's interest. Yet it gives Europe leverage that it has not yet used, a leverage to basically say, you want our money, you need to make this kind of reforms. And not cosmetic reforms, as we saw recently with the change of prime minister, but fundamental reforms that can actually build the nucleus, first of all, of re-establishing control in the West Bank, and then ultimately through a phase-in, phase-out process to start going into the West Bank. With this, into Gaza. With this, thank you very much. Looking forward to the conversation.
Is it working? Yeah. Well, thanks for that. Was to the point and sharp. I will give the floor to Ahmed Khuzaie, because what I want to do is a first round, as you may have understood, and then already give you the floor for questions. So we'll do Q&A questions right after the first round. So Ahmed Khuzaie is an international consultant with Khuzaie Associates. He's a member of the Gulf Israel Policy Forum, which bring together researchers from the Gulf and Israel. And he notably published The Kingdom of Bahrain, a political review, and more recently, Entanglement, a history of Iranian-Bahraini relations. So, Ahmed, you're focusing more on the Abraham Accords, and I just, it happened that they have been frozen since October 7. How do you explain this, and how to restart them?
Okay, thank you, David. Well, just like you said, I'm focusing mostly on the Accords and the people-to-people aspect of the Accords. Since those two nations, and I'm talking here about the Arab world collectively and Israel. Israel has been in the Middle East for the past 75 years, but to us, it was a ghost nation. We were not supposed to communicate. It was against the law. It will put some people in jail for that, as well as we could not understand what the Israelis are all about, their culture, their understanding of politics as well. Everything we got was through either the Palestinians, or if you wanted to call somebody in Israel, was through the Jordanians or the Egyptians, through the what I call the cold peace agreements they had. It was agreements between two nations to stop wars. In the Gulf, we never had engaged in direct wars with Israel. Yes, back in 48, a few fragments here and there, but nothing officially happened. So right after the Accords were signed, we're celebrating the 4th anniversary. But what kind of celebration is that? I mean, it was already facing lots of obstacles since day one. The Palestinians did not agree to it, thinking that everything has to be about them when it comes to dealing with Israel and the Middle East. While in the Gulf, after paying all those trillions of dollars throughout the years, just like my colleague mentioned earlier, it was not conditioned. It was free money. So what are the Accords all about? Just trade? Since the Accords were signed, Israel did not enforce the fact that those new Arab allies could play a part in pressuring the Palestinians, since we're paying for rebuilding their areas all the time, and it was, again, not conditioned. As well, it was by the Arabs, by not enforcing their place along with the Palestinians. So it's by both sides. From there, what did the Accords achieve? It was merely nothing more than 4% of the total GDP of Israel. So it was not big. Yet, what did it affect? After the 7th October war, almost 1 year now, nothing more than 2% less than what it used to be before the war. I'm talking about between the Accords countries and Israel. So the effect on the Accords is not major. It's the media effect, it's what people think about it, and that's where I come from. I come from Bahrain, the country that signed the Accords along with Emirates the first day. The social discord, if I may call it, people are angrily taking the streets. And when I say taking the streets, Bahrain is a small country. It's a small island with 1.5 million in population, out of which we're talking less than 100 people going out on a protest against the Accords, against the ongoing war, and against the monarchy, which is a hidden message within that envelope. They're not really protesting the war. They don't really care that much about the Palestinian issue, especially the Shia fragment. They're following what the Ayatollahs are saying, are telling them to do. I come from a country where Iran is still claiming my country as their own. So it's a multiplex of ideologies mixed within one message. It's not all about the Palestinians. Yet our governments, what did that change after the war? Nothing much in reality. But in front of media, they can say that we are still supporting Israel unconditionally. that will create bigger problem, bigger discord with their people, with their citizens. But in reality, they're still working close, especially when it comes to the Iranian issue with the proxies, where we share the same enemy. The Arab countries could not eradicate the proxies, which is today the biggest plague we have in the Middle East. Israel is doing it on our behalf. Israel is doing it on the world's behalf. We see that growing, especially with whatever happened throughout this past year through the campuses of the United States of America. The Americans did not see that happening before, but it's growing. And the anti-Semitism sentiment is growing as well. So this is a beast that has to be tamed today, actually yesterday, and nobody's facing it directly, except for Israel. Those proxies are not just in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. They are in the Gulf states as well as sleeper cells in some states, and openly, like my country in Bahrain. So what could save the Accords? The Accords nations themselves, Israel and the Arab friends that they are newly found lately. So I think that should answer the question.
Well, thank you so much. I'm, very lucky to have experts who are basically to the point since we're quite late. As I said, I will give you the floor for a few questions. I know that I already have a question from actually one expert in the room. Benham Taliblu, I think you wanted to ask a question to General Amidror.
Thank you very much. General Benham Ben Taliblu.
Can you move a little bit? I don't see you.
Sure.
Yep.
Hi, General Benham Ben Taliblu, Senior Fellow covering Iran at FDD in Washington. A question on the long-range strike capabilities you said Israel would need to continue to push back against the Houthis and the Iranian state itself. Israel already has MRBMs, and it recently displayed this new Air-LORA, air-launched ballistic missile. Is there a new technology that you're familiar with that the Israelis are going to be developing for those longer-range standoff precision weapons that they'll be using, or is it the refinement of this capability that they already have? So something they would put on the F-35, like the Air-LORA, or a new MRBM that's under development, or is it an entirely new platform? Because Israel has successfully done exactly this on April 19th in Iran and several times, as reported in the media, against targets in Yemen via air.
As you know, we don't speak about our specific capabilities, and for sure not about our future specific capabilities. So the answer is we will try to surprise the other side whenever we can.
Okay. Another question.
Hello, I just moved so you can see me. I'm Mattia Bagnoli, correspondent for ANSA, the National Italian News Agency here in Brussels. It's a question for all of you. In your presentation, one of the arguably lacking issue discussed is the so-called two-state solution. I mean, obviously here in Brussels, one of the debate is this thing is over, once the war is over, then we have to move to a peace-building process. And the formula is the two-state solution, but obviously there seems not to be a two-state solution. So the question is, in your view, what is the end game then? What is the practical step that can lead to the end of the war, basically, and in a state of peace that is meaningful for all the parties involved? Thank you.
From the Israeli perspective, the war in Lebanon is totally not connected to the two-state solution. The Iranians' dream to destroy Israel is not connected to the Palestinians at all. It's about the Iranian imperial dream. As the Shiites leading the the Muslim world in the Middle East, and maybe in the world. With the Palestinians are very minor, if at all, issue for the dream of the Iranians. Yes, they are using it as an excuse, but in many cases. But at the end, for the Iranians, who are the Palestinians? None of them is Shiite, by the way. Regarding our relations with the Palestinians and Gaza, for sure, is connected to the Palestinian issue. Look, I spoke with the prominent American member of the administration, and I asked, "What is your plans about the Palestinian Authority?" And she said it's about non-corruption, because they understand it's a very corrupted one, and democratization. I say corruption is your problem. It's like taking oxygen from human being. To take corruption from the Palestinian Authority, it's like taking oxygen from a human being. But about democratization, does it include elections? And she said, of course, democracy without elections, how it works. And I said, okay, can you guarantee us, the Israelis, that Hamas is not going to win the elections? And she said, honestly, not. So from this answer, you understand that for the Israelis, the two-state solution with democratization or without democratization is not an option. We will not let Hamas state to be built in Ramallah. The green line is less than 12 kilometers from my house in Ra'anana. So do I want to live in a situation in which Hamas is controlling area 12 kilometers from my house? If you are not very, 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 very naive or stupid or both, you will not agree to that. So I told the lady, you know what? First step, instead of doing great demands from the Palestinians, less corruption, democratization, it's very complicated to change the culture. Ask them just to make one move, to outlaw Hamas, that within the Palestinian Authority, Hamas cannot exist as a movement. And that cannot be accepted by the Palestinians. If that cannot be accepted by the Palestinians, they will not have an independent state. Israel, after 7th of October, will not allow any Palestinian entity which might be led by Hamas to exist in the West Bank or in Gaza. So if someone wants to push the dream of a Palestinian state, the first step that must done within the Palestinian system is to outlaw Hamas. If that cannot be accepted, they can forget about the dream.
Thank you. Omari, you wanted to react to what the general just said.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not really reacting to the general. And I think, by the way, what Yaakov said reflects not only your view, but this is what I hear from most Israelis, including those on the left these days. So this is a reality we have to deal with. But actually, I want to address the question directly. First of all, I think the two-state solution has to be looked at different levels. At the kind of most abstract level, to my mind, it has to remain the aspiration and the objective. Partly because I believe that's the only possible solution, but more importantly, because right now this is the uniting, organizing principle of regional and global diplomacy when it comes to this issue. Remove it and our whole diplomatic system around it will actually collapse. So it has to remain as the future aspiration, and it's not only, I mean, as I mentioned in my presentation, right now the Saudis need to hear these words in order to engage in Gaza and later on engage with the Israelis, the Emiratis, the Bahrainis, and others. So you need it as, sometimes fictions are important in diplomacy and politics, and this is a very important aspirational fiction. But to get it, you need two things. To get a two-state solution, you need two things. You need, first of all, the question of, is the politics right? I think what we heard from Yaakov reflects clearly where the Israeli politics is and mindset here. I suspect with time it might change, but this is where we are now. And Palestinian politics right now, weak, divided, incapable. So if you want to have a two-state solution negotiation right now, obviously it's going to fail. The third question, which leads me to the third question. The third issue is the question of capabilities. At the end of the day, and this is a question that we faced even when I was a negotiator some 20 years ago, no one wants to have a failed Palestinian state on their borders. It's not only the Israelis, by the way. Talk to the Jordanians, talk to the Egyptians. They will tell you the same. We don't want a mess. We have enough messes in the region. And so you have to build the capabilities. The capabilities are primarily security capabilities, but they're also governance capabilities. And here, this is where I disagree with Yaakov. I would say the issue of good governance, not democracy. Again, I repeat, not democracy. This is the Middle East. Good governance is essential. If you look at the success of some of the models in the region, the UAE, Saudi.Now, Bahrain, etc., it is really rooted in the idea of how can you provide responsive, effective, efficient governance. So these are the capabilities that need to be built, and at the same time, Israel has to do its own part. The last point here is there's a conceptual question. I think after October 7th, the mistrust between both peoples is so deep. It's more than generational. On both sides, by the way. And we have to reconceptualize the two-state solution. When I was a negotiator, we thought of it as a partnership, a flirtation leading to marriage. That's overloading the cart. Think of it as a divorce with very, very strong separation guarantees, and have to start thinking of a more minimalist and more security-oriented two-state solution approach when we get to that point.
It's a big problem for me because I am married to the same woman since 74. I don't have a clue how to deal with divorce.
I'm not going to give you advice on this one.
Okay, love this one. Yes, we have more questions.
Thank you, gentlemen. Forgive me for going back to the more or less the same question. You've mentioned reality, let's be pragmatic, but there is a plan, at least the Al-Qidwa, who was an official from the Palestinian Authority, Omari, ex-Prime Minister of Israel. What is your assessment? Is it needed a plan, or this is not the time at all to promote a two-state solution? Thank you.
Today, if you put Israelis and Palestinians in a room and say negotiate a deal, they will fail. They will fail because they don't trust one another, and more important, they will fail because they know if they reach a deal and go to their publics will reject it. Keep the promise alive, but don't go too fast.
Another question on the left. Can you please present yourself when you ask the question?
Yes, hi, I'm Didier Loraz from AFP Newswire. For the past year, we've heard quite a lot of experts saying, for some reason, October 7 took the region so low that maybe it is the best chance ever to reach a solution. I would like the three of you, just because you have to discuss. This cannot happen anymore. This cannot happen again. So, not saying, of course, General, not saying Hamas was right to do it. This is not what I'm saying. The situation is so bad that everybody needs to get out of it. I would like the three of you to answer that. Thank you.
Our decision was clear. We are not negotiating after 7th of October, for sure not with any Palestinian team which might include members of Hamas, because they cannot ignore Hamas, as they say. The Israeli decision after 7th of October was not to negotiate, was to make sure for the Middle East and everyone who looks at the Middle East that any organization which did what had been done by Hamas will not exist anymore. I mean, it's an idea, for sure they will be there. Muslim Brotherhood was organized in in Egypt in almost 100 years ago, 28. So we cannot take the idea, we cannot fight the idea, and you don't want to fight the idea. We will not let any organization which done what had been done in 7th of October to exist as a military organization near the borders of Israel. And so from our point of view, negotiation was not in the cards at all after the 7th of October. On the contrary, it was clear that we are going to a long war.
Look, I mean, I think you got, I mean, this is the right question. Because before October 7th, to be honest, the region and Israel thought the Palestinian issue was so passé. You know, we don't have to think about it. Abraham Accords, with the exception of the Emiratis, did not even mention the Palestinian issue. You would go to the, you know, cool Israel, Tel Aviv, Haifa, and they will talk to folks there. They will, you think like you're somewhere in Europe. Like this is not their conflict. I think October 7th, unfortunately, was a very tragic reminder that this issue still has a lot of resonance, and that's why, and that's exactly why you see countries like Saudi Arabia right now, which on October 6th was kind of, you know, when it's talking to the Americans, the Israelis almost barely mentioning it, now they become fixated on it. So I think it brought it back to the center. And that forces your question. The question is, how do you go from here? Because, you know, one analytical point is to see, okay, the situation before that was unsustainable. But another analytical question was, okay, all of our previous attempts have also failed. And so do you want to repeat failure? And that's, I think, where we are still struggling right now, struggling to finding how do you get to that objective, but through a methodology that is different from what we had in the past. And that's why right now I would say you don't want to start with the top-down negotiations. As I repeat, it will fail. But how can you start addressing this issue in different ways? We have a major challenge ahead of us when it comes to the stabilization, rehabilitation, and ultimately reconstruction of Gaza. Do we repeat what happened in 2006, where we in the West, the United States and Europe, were sitting and waiting, are we going to pay some reconstruction money where the Iranians and the Qataris were pumping money into the West? Or do we use this as a platform to create another alternative, etc.? How do you use the region right now through the Abraham Accords to create the center of gravity? In the past has always been an American-led Western-based coalition. Can we have a regional coalition that can deal with this? And all these kind of new questions that we have to address. But I agree with you, on the one hand, we cannot ignore the Palestinian-Israeli conflict on the one hand, but on the other hand, we cannot repeat the same mistakes we had in the past because unfortunately, I think they will lead us to the same place. And again, Gaza reconstruction, to my mind, probably is the linchpin of where you start a lot of these conversations.
Ahmed?
I would like to just take a step back to October 7th on the first day. If we agree that such an operation was not within the capabilities of Hamas alone to pull, that will take us to the reason for the war. Is Israel fighting Hamas as a militia from Gaza? Or is it fighting a proxy war all over the Middle East? That would explain the war, or basically what's happening in Lebanon today, and that would explain bigger operations later on if it happens. We have Yemen, we have Iraq. It was not only Hamas that's attacking. So let's put it that way. Iran is not willing to fight a war directly with Israel. It's sending its minions, its proxies. So by taking them back to where they came from today, it will bring back Iran to the wellness of, are you willing to fight an open war against Israel on your own, or are you not? And I don't think they have the capabilities to do it, neither the will to do it. So by what Israel is doing today to the proxies, it's putting an end to the war, deflecting the question, the two-state solution, or the day after eliminating all the proxies, more or less.
Thank you. To my right.
Hi, I'm Jonathan freelancer in the UK. I'd like to ask how the current situation in the last year shifts Iran's outlook. So is it likely now, in this moment of change, that they will step back? Or is there on the cards a need for actually the battle to be taken much more directly to Iran rather than going through all these proxies, which is, as you've said, a success of their strategy so far? So far, they're paying very little price personally.
I'm sure that from Bahrain it's looked different. From the Israeli point of view, we don't know what will be the reaction of Iran. It's a big puzzle for us. For many years there was an argument in Israel, should we go to the head of the dragon or to take the legs or the hands of the dragon? At the end, the decision was not in our hands. Hamas forced us to fight one of the legs, Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza. Then Nasrallah declared war on Israel on the 8th of October by launching rockets and missiles. And again, we didn't have any other option but to react. Many Israelis think that now, not now, but when we will finish with Hezbollah and eroding its capability to a level in which we know how to deal with, that will be the best time to go on Iran. Other Israelis are saying, guys, we are in a war, and then we will be in a war for probably 2 years. For a little state like Israel to go for a third-year war with Iran, it's a little bit kind of bet that Israel should not take. There are risks that you are not taking, even if the price is very, very high. And here, clear that the results are very high. The benefit might be very high. But the price for a little country little countries should be more cautious in their actions. I don't know. There is no decision in Israel. We are preparing ourselves. We are putting a lot of efforts to be better prepared for a war with Iran. It's a different kind of a war. You don't need ground forces, maybe special forces here and there, but you don't need ground forces. It is about launching long-range missiles from one side to another. When Hezbollah and more so Hamas are out of the equation, it's much easier for Israel, no question. Much, much easier for Israel. Will it be the right time to do it? I don't know. And the decision here is, for the time being, we are not making decisions, but we are making very important preparations. We will see what will happen, and then we will decide. I can tell you there are many friends of mine that will be more than happy if Israel will be attacked by the Iranians, because they will have the excuse, the frame within which to show the Iranians what price they will pay.
Thank you. So just for your information, we have 10 more minutes. Yeah, of course. We have 10 more minutes. I would like Ahmed to also comment on this answer on this to this question. But we have 10 more minutes, and our expert will be here for the whole day, so there will be possibility for one-on-one interview. So don't worry, you have enough time to ask additional questions. Yes, Ahmed, I just wanted to know what would be your reflection on what the general said and the question that was just asked about Iran, the possibility for Iran to go full war against Israel after Nasrallah was killed.
Okay. Through what happened, as an example, we've been talking about 4 years of instability in Iran. I'll take a benchmark of the assassination of Soleimani. It's almost 4 years now, more or less. What was the response? I mean, Soleimani is, until today, stronger than any sitting president. I'm not talking about the Ayatollah. Ever since his death, basically, the RGC has not been the same. They replaced him. They have lots of heads grew in his place, but nobody has taken his place. Just like Hassan Nasrallah. He's not just a brain, and he may not be a brain. He's the face. He's the brand. Without him, they will lose lots of support. I remember older women back home worshipping whatever he says, and I'm talking here about Hassan Nasrallah, not knowing what his ideas are, his ideologies, even with his interferences with the Arab Spring around the Middle East. He was against, he was alongside with the Ayatollahs and whatever they were saying. So people would listen to him as a credible source. Same thing with Soleimani. Soleimani single-handedly created those proxies. We didn't see them getting weaker because we couldn't see on the inside. Yet in reality, Israel proved it within 1 year now. So Soleimani, the president of Iran, lots of officials were being found killed on the streets. Iran is not stable for the past 4 years. You have an uprising in what used to be called Arabstan, which, by the way, was taken over by Iran 10 years prior to whatever happened in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. That was in 1935 almost, and nobody's talking about that. We're talking about Baluchistan with their tendencies to separate from the mainland or the motherland. We have all this happening within that the media is not covering. Revolting within prisons in Iran, and many more. What happened with the death of their president? I'm not going to say who did it. It was not provided to any of us, but their president went by. Hassan Nasrallah is gone. Their strongholds are being brought down. What have they done? You see somebody, their president last week in New York, announcing that we could lay down the arms and start talking and negotiating, while their Ayatollah is talking to the crowds emotionally. And he's not addressing the Iranian people. He's addressing those proxies around the region. What is he saying? We're still fighting. Why? For them to keep fighting, not within Iran. Iran is not willing to go to war. Financially, they can't finance it. I think the general mentioned earlier, or was it you? I can't recall, that it's much cheaper for them to fight through proxies. They can't fight in an open war, not financially, not emotionally, even their people won't do it. They're still suffering from the first Gulf War against Iraq. They're still suffering. People are still hating the system for it. They can't afford to find a second war. So what are we going to see later on? I think a retract from the Iranian side to calm things down. That's what I think. I'm not an expert in military. This is just my reading.
Thank you very much. On my left, yes.
Thanks. Jack Power from the Irish Times. Just a question for the general. I suppose, how much do you feel the damage to Israel's reputation during the war harms its security? And secondly, when you mentioned the prospect of a genocide-type situation in Gaza, I suppose, how much would you be concerned that would turn into possibly a kind of a forever war? Obviously with the prospect for Hamas in some shape or form there. Thank you.
I think that there is an assumption behind the question which is not connected to reality. We had, in a long war, unfinished war with Hamas, anyhow. Hamas is very clear about its goal, to destroy Israel. Look at their all their papers, all their propaganda. So we had in a war. Now we decided that Hamas will not be effective enough to wage the war. And we will have to continue to fight Hamas in Gaza as we are fighting Hamas in Jenin. But it is totally another level of war. Before the 7th of October, as we learned in the 7th of October, they had the ability to raid into Israel, to kill, to destroy, to rape, to kidnap, whatever. They will lose it. The length of the war was not changed because of what Israel is doing in Gaza. That was before the war. That was true about 6th of October as well. So, with all due respect, The answer is yes, we had been in the war with Hamas since the establishment of Hamas for eternity, because Hamas want to destroy Israel, and I don't see that it will be stopped one day. Before the war in Gaza, they had the ability to do it. After the war in Gaza, they don't have the ability to do it. They will be a guerrilla challenge for the special forces of Israel, like their brothers in Jenin. Not more than that. How long? Till they will be existed. By the way, peace can be achieved tomorrow morning if they stop the war against Israel. Remember, in Gaza there is no occupation. Israel is totally out of Gaza. We took out from Gaza even the graves of Jews in the graveyards. So it is not about occupation. It's about the destruction of the state of Israel. We gave them the ability to build the capability. Now we are taking the capabilities, and they will remain as an idea, as guerrilla force, whatever.
To my right.
Thank you. Alexander Ibsen from Minerva, Norway. With a diminished power of Hezbollah, what sort of opportunities are opening up for approachment between Lebanon and Israel? And how do the Lebanese view this opportunity?
There is an argument in Israel, should Israel attack Lebanese governmental facilities? I'm against it, personally. Why? Because I know that Lebanon is a raped state. The Lebanese don't like Hezbollah at all. I think it will be real free elections like in democracy in Lebanon tomorrow. Probably 65–70% of the Lebanese will be against Hezbollah. Hezbollah kidnapped Lebanon and used it. I don't think that the diminishing of the force of Hezbollah by Israel will bring it to the level in which the Lebanese will stop being afraid from Hezbollah. That cannot be done by Israel. That can be done only by the Lebanese. If we will have huge success, we will diminish the ability of Hezbollah to launch rockets and missiles into Israel. But still, Hezbollah will be the strongest force inside Lebanon. If you speak versus the other militias, which most of them do not exist, the Druze have something, and the Lebanese army. So I'm very pessimistic about the ability of Israel to diminish the capabilities of Hezbollah to the level in which the Lebanese will stop afraid from Hezbollah.
Just to continue on the same sentiment, the Israelis can do it, the Israelis shouldn't try to do it, but there are others who can actually help in this process. I look at Europe, and France, frankly, has a very special role that it can play, but it's also important to push some of our allies in the region, particularly the Saudis, to come and play a role. The Saudis pulled back once Rafiq Hariri was assassinated. They need to play a role again. They want to be the regional leader. They should live up to it. One thing I would say, even if that succeeds, I wouldn't want to start the new Lebanese system and overload it with something like, let's have peace with Israel. That's not something, they need a lot of time to consolidate in the best case scenario and give them that chance. And in the meantime, let's just accept that there is the quiet instability between Israel and Lebanon is good enough for the time being.
I will take one last question because we're already quite late. There was a question there.
I don't know. Ja, okay. No. Nigar Marduchaeva from ARD, Westdeutscher Rundfunk. You were just speaking, Mr. Amidror, about the goal of Hamas and that it's clear. The goal is to destroy Israel. And before you were listing 4 issues why Hamas was successful in performing the horrors of the 7th of October, please allow to ask, when you said before that it was possible to succeed because Israel also underestimated Hamas, could you please allow the question, what do you mean by Israel underestimated, Hamas, when the goal is so clear?
First, myself, I thought that Hamas, unlike ISIS, is not an organization which was imposed from the outside on the Gaza population. It was elected by the Gaza population. Sinwar was born in Gaza, raised in Gaza, and its brothers and sisters inside. I thought that they will see themselves as the branch of the Muslim Brotherhood which want to show the Muslim Brotherhood government can govern. It's the only place in which Muslim Brotherhood branch has the ability to govern on land and people and to show that it is a serious alternative. I thought that because Sinwar is part of the Gaza society, he will try to elevate the standard of living, education, economy, whatever. We underestimate the strengths of the jihad motivation in these people. And then we underestimate their military capability, but it is a minor issue relative to the misunderstanding of their strategy approach. We didn't understand that the strategy approach of this organization is jihad, 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 and everything in secondary. And I'm warning you, the Europeans, you have to understand those organizations, doesn't matter how nice suits they have. What motivates them at the end is jihad, jihad, jihad. Yes, they know how to put it in many frames and nice words and so on and so forth. But our strong lesson from what we learned after the 7th of October, don't believe them.
I just want to add, it was not only an Israeli failure, it was a collective failure. This is the concept we had in the United States, our both kind of policy and intelligence world. This is the concept that the Egyptian intelligence had, the Jordanians had. This was a collective failure, and a failure that is partly because of, we wanted to be blindsided, but also this is a narrative that was pushed by some of Hamas's backers, particularly Qatar and Turkey, that wanted to really invested in pushing this narrative. So yes, the Israelis paid the price and you have to do your own soul searching, but I think collectively in the region and in the kind of global security order, we need to also examine our assumptions and our methodology.
Ahmed?
Yes. I'll just add to that everybody looked at Hamas as a Muslim Brotherhood offshoot, which is true until 2005. Between the period between 2005 and 2012, that was the transition of Hamas of transiting into a proxy of the Ayatollahs of Iran. Prior to that, they were hardcore Muslim Brotherhood, which they were trying to govern. But since the finance source changed from the Gulf states, in 2005, when they started asking for proof of purchase, what are you doing with the money we're giving you? When that started happening and the Iranian money started flooding in, that's when they took over and changed the ideology from a not clear kind of militia that was partially jihadist, partially governing, to a proxy full-time to Iran. And that made the biggest change. In 2012, I think it was Haniya who was touring the Gulf states asking for more money, and he was rejected, saying that you can't take money from two sources, it's either us or Iran. And they chose Iran in 2012, and that was the end of the relationship as we know it, except for Qatar, of course, but that's the way it is. So from there, we were blindsided, not understanding the implications of being a full-time employee of Iran.
Thank you so much. Just if I may, because I asked you the question about how do you leverage the Abraham Accords in a post-war scenario. Can you just briefly relate to that? Is there a way for the Arab countries to be involved in a particular way after the war in Gaza?
Yes, I mentioned it earlier that it was mentioned briefly in the Accords. The Palestinians understood the Accords as it was an agreement about them solely, as all the previous agreements between Israel and any Arab nation. Well, it was not. It was mentioned briefly that we would like to have relations with Israel for our own good. We're fighting Israel, we're fighting other issues, drought, for example, amongst the issues. So agri-tech is a big portion of the Accords. It's not merely political or about the Palestinians. That's why the Palestinians felt outsided or blindsided by the Accords, and they were fighting against it. Now, the future of the Accords today, that's a big challenge. It's left in the hands of Israelis and Accords countries to them to take it to the next level. Can we, as Abraham Accords countries, beside Israel, live up to this place? Try to engage with the solution post 7th October or not? That will be, I think, the parameter to gauge if the Accords will succeed or not. I have written a paper about that. If anybody is interested, I'll share it with you later on.
Thank you so much.
I think that it is very much connected to the results of the war. The more peaceful will be Gaza after the war, and incursions between IDF and Hamas remnants will be very low, and the more successful Israel will be diminishing the capabilities of Hezbollah, and it will be clear that Iran is weaker because of that, the easier will be for the Abraham Accord countries to resume the efforts. Some big project were almost behind the corner, in a combination between Jordan, Israel, and Gulf countries. There were some other big projects that had been on the table in Israel to offer to the Gulf countries for the benefit of both, and American money was involved. And the idea was how you find project in which both sides are have benefits from the project and not only one. I give you the one example of combination of water and electricity to build huge project of electricity in the Jordanian desert, to desalinate water in the Gulf of Aqaba, to give the water to the Palestinians from desalination projects in the Mediterranean, and to transfer the electricity from Jordan to Israel. So all the countries will benefit from, Jordan, Palestinians, Israelis, and the Gulf countries will be those who will finance the project for the benefit of all, and at the end they will make money. So that was the idea, one of the ideas. It's a huge project, take 10 years probably to finish it for all these details, but after the war, if we succeed to build the situation in which the countries don't hesitate to cooperate, the sky is the limit. You know, many few years I spoke in the Washington Institute with Turki al-Faisal, the Saudi prince, and he said, General, you have to give the Palestinians what they want, because with your money and our mind, we can change the world. And now, if I don't see the Palestinians getting their dream, but I really think that with the efforts of Israelis and Gulf countries together, everyone will benefit, including the Palestinians.
Just very quickly to the point of how do you leverage the Abraham Accords in the Palestinian case, I would say the following. First and foremost, we have to avoid the temptation to think of the Gulf simply as an ATM, which is often how, frankly, we think of it in the Levant as well as often in the West. I think it's insulting, it's inaccurate, and etc. I think the Gulf has, and the Abraham Accord countries, but include Saudi Arabia in this one, have three sets of issues to present. First of all, they have a lot of leverage on the Palestinians that no one else, certainly leverage that we in the West do not have. They have leverage on Israel, based on trust and based on aspirations that we cannot. And they have technical abilities to get involved in building the kind of stable, frankly, non-radical Palestinian governance and political system that can kind of satisfy someone like Yaakov to start getting engaged again in the idea of how do we find a solution to this.
Thank you for that. On that optimistic note, we will finish this panel, which I think was extremely enlightening, very interesting. And as I said already, you will be able to ask questions, one-on-one questions to the experts in the whole day. So thank you very much.